What's up guys, Patrick here from Top Tier Gaming, and today I'm coming at you with a profile for Machina Control. Machina is one of my favorite archetypes throughout all of Yu-Gi-Oh's history. Ever since the Machina Structure deck came out, way back in 2010 I think, this deck has been on my list of decks that I really enjoy because Gearframe and Fortress are such incredible cards, and I've tried to play it throughout all of Yu-Gi-Oh's history. Every time it was viable, I would probably be playing it a little bit, but right now I think it's at one of its strongest points because it got skill drain off of the ban list on January 27th, I think, and I think it is one of the best decks at abusing skill drain. It doesn't really care about the effect negation because it just has the biggest monsters in the main deck, so it can usually punch over anything your opponent puts up, which is what really matters whenever skill drain's on the field. The current iteration of the list plays a lot of trap cards in order to simplify the game state so that biggest attack wins is just the best way to play that current game, and it's just a game plan that I enjoy playing because I get to play cool cards like Fortress that pop even under skill drain where you crash into something, and you can even out skill drains if you need your effects by using Fortress to pop skill drains after crashing into something. Now with all that said, let's go ahead and do its profile. First off, we're playing triple Gearframe. Gearframe is the best normal summon of the deck. On summon, it searches any Machina monster and adds it from your deck to your hand, which is super nice because by himself he represents a +3 because you'll search the one of Machina and counterparts whenever he's added to your hand by any effect except by drawing. He special summons himself and then he'll send any Machina monster from your deck to the grave. So you can put Citadel, you can put Fortress, you can put Runeforce in your grave just off the summon of Gearframe and then make a rank 4 with these two, which is super insane. Now the next normal summon in the deck that we're playing is Double Metal Cruncher. This card's alright. It's not as good as it is in Earth Machine because you don't have as many cards that you want to be revealing off of it like you do in Earth Machine. Because Earth Machine has Brutal Dozer, and it has the Trains, and it has all these other really good cards it can reveal. Metal Cruncher is usually only revealing Runeforce or Fortress or Citadel, purely because Gearframe guaranteed searches here in Glassbars. I think it's the better summon, but you still want to play 2 Metal Cruncher because it gives you 5 normal summons in the deck. That is it for the normal summons / starters of the deck. Next up, we have Double Machina Fortress. This is kind of like the iconic Machina monster to me. He has been around since 2010. He was like the boss monster in the structure deck. You pitch machines from your hand to your grave in order to special summon him, and that can include himself. So you can pitch like a level 4 along with him to special summon him. And it's not a once per turn to special himself. And whenever he's targeted by a monster effect, he, before resolving that effect, rips a card out of your opponent's hand. When he's destroyed by battle, he pops an opponent's card, any card, like monster or spell trap, which is super insane because it even outs face-up floodgates. Things like there can be only one, summon limit, skill drain even, because it'll crash and activate in grave, which is super nice for this card. Next up, we have one Aerator. Aerator's super good, but you never want to open him by himself. So we only play 1 copy, because whenever you want this card, you want to search it. So you can search it off of your Gearframe or your redeployment, but he's still very good. You can pitch a Machina monster to special himself, and then you can target a machine during your opponent's turn. You can target a machine on your field, special summon a Machina with an equal or lower level, and then pop that card that you targeted, which is super nice because it procs Citadel and Grave whenever you target either himself to summon out things like Fortress, you can summon your glass bars to send. So yeah, Aerator's really good, but definitely still a 1. Play 1 Citadel. This is kind of the new iconic boss monster of Machina. He's a Regeki for your opponent's board. Whenever you target a machine on your board, it pops everything with attack equal to or lower than on your opponent's side of the field, which is super nice in this deck because you can pop up to 4,600 and lower, which is really crazy. But most of the time you're targeting himself and popping for 3k, which is still very, very good. Next up, we play 1 copy of Runeforce. Runeforce is the newest card and added into the deck. He is a really, really strong monster, but he's just kind of niche. You can banish machine monsters whose level equal 12 or higher to special summon him from the grave, and then whenever you enter the battle phase, if your opponent activates a card or effect, you can have both players' life points and then negate that effect, which is super nice to be able to reduce them to like 4k if they're at full health, and then punch them for 46. That's pretty much game. And if you have Runeforce, you probably have one of these out as well with it. So you're pretty much always going to be able to go for game if you summon him. Plus he's a 10, so you can make rank 10s with Citadel and along with another monster that we'll cover later on in the profile. Runeforce is also not once per turn to summon himself. Whenever he's destroyed by battle or card effect, he then special summons back from banish up to 3 Machina monsters whose level equal 12 or lower, which is really insane to just get back the resources that you've banished in order to summon him. So he just has some recursion. You can summon him and then torrential and then special summon back all of the cards that were used to make him. Next up, we're playing triple copies of Machina Redeployment. This card's super insane. You discard a card and search 2 Machina monsters, and then if you discarded a Machina card, you can add Machina cards. So if you discard, say for instance Citadel, you can search Overdrive and another monster, which is really crazy. This card is really good. You want to save it though as not your like starter. So if you have any other normal summon, you want to do that first and then activate redeployment if they interact with that. Because this is like the best starter in the deck outside of normal summon gear frame. Then the last Machina cards we're playing in the main deck, we're playing triple Overdrive. Overdrive targets a machine on your board, special summons a Machina with a different name from your deck, and then pops that monster. So this basically tutors into any Machina monster that you need at any time, and then it can also Daigusto Emerald, where it'll target cards in your graveyard or banish, shuffle them back, and then draw a card, which is really nice to be able to get Citadels that have been banished from your grave, or by like Wakeros, and by things like Ice Dragon's Prison. It allows you to get them back into rotation into your deck, which is super nice. Granted, usually games 2-3, you're sliding out one copy of this because you want to try to fit in better cards for matchups, depending on what you need in your side deck. But I still think playing 3 in the main deck is correct, and you can just side out copies as needed. You rely much more heavily on this card than Earth Machine does, because your deck is purely focused around Machina, so you want to guaranteed have access to your Machina cards, and this gives you access to them. Onto the regular monsters, we're playing 2 Lord of the Heavenly Prison. This card's really insane in this deck because he's a 10, so he can go into your trains in your extra deck, as well as being a starter for your deck. If you open just a bunch of trap cards in him, you can just set them all, and then set redeployment on the final one whenever you special summon him, which is super nice to give you a starter for your next turn. Then the Jar Power we're playing in the deck, we're playing triple Extrav because we want to just draw cards. Most of the time it doesn't matter what you banish, and that's kind of why I've decided to play this. I've been going back and forth between playing 3 copies of this and 3 copies of this, 2 of the other, but Prosperity is also really good. I just really wanted to play 5 draw cards in the deck, and you can't afford to play the One of Desires anymore, and you can't play pretty much any other draw cards in the deck, so these are what we're stuck with. Because most of the time, the only thing you need in your extra deck is your Gear Gigant, and that's usually on turn 1. So after your turn 1 play, most of the time your extra deck is pretty like flexible. You don't need everything in it. The last spell we're playing is one called Overdrive. This card's pretty good. It stops hand traps, and it's also just a good trap to set, because I always treat Call of the Grave in control decks as a trap card, not really as a I'm going to defend my play. But granted, you will use it when you need your play to go through. But yeah, that card should probably be banned if we're being real. Onto the normal trap cards, playing triple Compulse, triple Torrential, and double Ice Dragon's Prison. At the moment, I prefer playing my trap cards that aren't hard once per turns, like Torrential and like Compulse, at 3, and Ice Dragons, things that are once per turn, I like playing at lower rates, usually at 2. Torrential and Compulse I think are really good. Torrential is just like a staple trap in this deck because it summons Citadel from your grave whenever you use it, if you have him in rotation. And then Compulse is very good to me in the PK matchup because you can just bounce things like Bardish, things like Cherubini, and they can't get access to them in the grave. That's the same reason I think Ice Dragon's Prison is good. And that's why I think Torrential is a little less good versus that deck. Because you don't really want to destroy the PK cards, you either want to stop their summons, or banish them, or bounce them. That's the only ways you really want to be dealing with PK cards. So yeah, that's why we play this lineup. I also think Ice Dragon's Prison is very good in the Eldritch matchup. Compulse is okay in that matchup. You would just bounce the Eldritch so they can't get their pop or get their banish, which is still worth it most of the time. But I think it's pretty mediocre in that matchup because then they can just use his effect in hand, so it's kind of it. But we're not really playing these traps for Eldritch, except Ice Dragons. That one's very good against Eldritch. Next up, playing triple Solemn Strike. This card is absolutely insane. The Strike plus Torrential breaks pretty much every board in the game. Same thing with another card that we'll cover. We'll talk about that later though. Strike is just very good at stopping extra deck summons and stopping monster effects that are very detrimental to you. So I feel like if you're playing a trap deck, you have to be playing that card. Then we're playing triple Solemn Judgment. With backer hate in the main decks now because of things like Skill Drain, I think this card is mandatory now in the main deck. I used to prefer siding it and then just putting it in as I'm going first, but now it's kind of necessary to play 3 of it. Plus with control decks in the meta right now, you want to have main deck Solemn Judgments to play against them as well. Play 6 Solemns in total. And then the final card in the main deck, we play triple Skill Drain. Skill Drain's really insane in this deck because most of your effects are graveyard effects outside of things like Gear Frame. So a lot of the times, you don't really care about effects on board. You're just going to put big monsters on board and punch your opponent whenever skill drains up, because a lot of the times your opponent can't contest with a normal summon 2800 monster, or things like Citadel and Runeforce coming back from the grave and just being huge, and the Fortress being 25, and then if it does crash, it then pops a card, so it's really insane. Skill drain also combos with Torrential Tribute in a similar way to how Torrential combos with Strike, in that they'll try to stop the Torrential and you just chain the Strike or the skill drain, and then the board gets cleared still because they can't negate this skill drain. Most decks currently are only putting up one Omni Negate and then one Monster Negate, or like a multiple Monster Negates but only one Omni Negate. So usually you can bait out that with the Torrential and then chain the skill drain and clear the board. Alright guys, before I go ahead and get into the extra deck, make sure you like and subscribe. We're almost at 6,000 subs, and we want to try to hit that by the end of the month. It would be super cool of y'all. So if you like our channel, make sure you shout us out to your friends, join our Discord, follow our Twitter, all that good stuff. So yeah, let's get into this extra deck. We're playing 3 copies of Gear Gigant X. This is probably my favorite card in the deck outside of Fortress and Gear Frame, because it's just a legacy card to me. But it's also still super insane because it searches you another Gear Frame for your next turn whenever you summon this turn 1, which is super nice. He searches any level 4 or lower machine from your deck to your hand, which is crazy, at least in this deck. We'll play 1 Bespinato. I've considered bumping this to 2. I think Bespinato is really, really good, but right now I just don't know what I want to take out for it. It might be one of the links, which I'll get to in a minute. But Bespinato is really strong after you've searched twice off of a Gear Gigant to throw this on top of it and just have a 25 beater, that whenever they deal with this card, it then special summons a level 4 or lower from your grave to your field. Next up, we're playing some big trains. We play 2 Gustav Max, 1 Super Dora, and 1 Lieb. Gustav Max is probably my favorite rank 10. It just burns 2k with 2 level 10s, and then you can summon back whatever 10 you detach, usually the Runeforce. You can just summon it back and then have a bunch of damage on board. You'll have around 76 damage on board, which is so much damage in addition to the 2k that you already burned, which is usually enough to go for game. Super Dora is not exactly necessary, but sometimes you just need a 4k defender to set on, and he makes himself unaffected, so the only way they can deal with it is by punching it, which is pretty good. The Lieb is there to just push for games really hard. You overlay it on top of a Gustav that's already burned, and then detach, and it's 6k, can attack up to twice on monsters, and you've already burned them for 2k. So if you're playing against something like Salad that doesn't have their trap, or you've already baited their traps, you have Juggernaut Lieb attacking for 6k over usually like an 18 and a 2k in Mirage Stalio and Sunlight Wolf, plus the 2k they've already burned, so he just OTKs through that, which is really, really crazy because this card's pretty good at dealing with monster loads. Next up, we're playing 2 copies of Zeus. This card's really insane. Not once per chain, not once per turn. Effect to send the entire board outside of himself. He's really, really good. You can even overlay on top of him with another Zeus, which is ridiculous. He has another effect though, where if a face-up card you control is, if a card you control is destroyed by an opponent's card effect, you can then attach anything from your extra deck or main deck to it as material, and then usually that will give you enough for another send, which is pretty insane actually. It's come up a couple of times for me where I'll do that. Onto the Link monsters, we're playing 2 Double-Headed Anger Knuckle. This card's pretty good in this deck. If you don't need to make a Gear Gigant, say it's not turn 1 anymore, this card is usually your next go-to, because then it can special summon things from your grave. You don't get as much value off of it like you do in Earth Machine because you're not summoning Super Express back, but at the same time, it still gets cards on board that are Earth Machine, and it also outs your own skill drain, which is very important sometimes. Sometimes you have to have your Gear Frame resolve. Then we're also playing 2 copies of Clayfort Genius. Genius is pretty good. He's unaffected by the activated effects of other Link monsters, and he's unaffected by spell traps. And then whenever you control him, you can target a face-up card on your board and a face-up card on your opponent's board and negate both of them, which is really crazy to negate floodgates. You can just negate like a face-up card, like a face-up monster that you already have used its effect, and him to negate a face-up monster on your opponent's board, which is crazy. And then whenever you special summon 2 monsters to zones you point to at the same time, he can then add a level 5 or higher machine monster from your deck to your hand, which is really good because you play a lot of level 5 and higher that you want to have in your hand. Final card we're playing in the extra deck is 1 BLS. He's just kind of a pseudo boss monster that you can sit on in some matchups that your opponent can't deal with. He's really strong against things that have to target or destroy, because he can, if he's made with a level 7 or higher, he can't be targeted by opponent card effects or destroyed by card effects, which is really nice. And then when he goes into battle and he kills a card, he can then gain 1500, he can make a second attack in battle phase, or he can banish a card on field. He can do one of those 3 things, which if you make him 45, it can't be destroyed by card effects or targeted, like not many decks can deal with him. That's it for the extra deck. Going on into the side deck, we're playing 3 copies of Urgent Schedule. This card's really crazy. You get to make a lot of plays with this by going into your extra deck off of the summons with this, and it allows you to start looping things like Fortress out of your grave on your turn 1 against opponents. This card's really strong. And then whenever this set card is sent to grave, you can then add a level 10 machine monster from your deck to your hand, which is really crazy because you can add things like Runeforce, you can add Citadel. It's just really strong to be able to start getting access to your engine. Double-headed Anger Knuckle can send this card to do that. Is one of the reasons I mentioned that effect. Next up, we're playing 3 evenly. This is the best going second card in the game right now. Because of Lord of the Heavenly Prison, he just doesn't destroy, but he also deals with back row. And it is also good against PK because it banishes things and it doesn't destroy them, which is very nice. Because if it's destroyed, they can summon back things with Fogblade, or it can be Fogblade being sent to grave. So it's just better to have evenly matched because it will just banish them face down. So they're forced to use like their DPE to pop their back row and itself, and then they just don't get as much value off of it as they do things like Lightning Storm and Feather Duster. Pretty much the only hard going first card we're playing in the side deck is Triple Summon Limit. In a deck where you're summoning just big beats and then having traps, Summon Limit is super strong to protect that game plan because it just limits what your opponent can do. Like they summon 2 times and you just flip this and you have a 3k Raigeki on your board. There's not much your opponent can do against that. Another card that you put in going first quite a bit is Dark Bribe. We play 3 copies of it right now. This stops things like evenly matched because you don't really like judgmenting evenly matches, and it also is very good in the control match because you need more counter traps to deal with your opponent's strikes and judgments, and being able to tell them to draw 1 in order to pay half basically if you stop a judgment is super crazy. And at that point, it doesn't really matter that they draw a card. They've paid half, and whatever you activated previously is already resolving, which is crazy. Now, next up, this is probably the weirdest card in the side deck, but I think has a lot of potential this format, specifically into the control matchup, which is going to be very prevalent in my opinion, or I just see it going that way, is 3 copies of Witch's Strike. When your opponent stops the activation or the summon of a card that is yours, you destroy all cards on their field and in their hand, which is absolutely ridiculous. So, for example, if you attempt to floodgate your opponent in a control mirror and then they negate it, you can then, on resolution, activate your Witch's Strike, and then if they try to stop that, you can Dark Bribe it or you can Judgment it. If I have Witch's Strike, I'm letting them Judgment whatever my first card is, and I'm not bribing, because I want to stop their second thing so I can destroy their whole board with the Witch's Strike. And I think Witch's Strike has been waiting for its time to shine, and I think the current format may be its time. I could be wrong, this may be a called shot that I'm missing, but I do think Witch's Strike is very strong. Alright guys, that has been the profile. I want to go ahead and show you how strong just opening Gearframe is by himself in the current build of this deck. I want to go ahead and show you what it can do. This card is a +3, because you're going to normal summon your Gearframe, you're going to activate effect to add, then you're going to add to your hand your Class Bars, and Class Bars is going to activate, it's going to special, and then his effect is going to activate to send. Now you have a couple options here that you can send. If you have in your hand your Runeforce or your Citadel, you can send your Fortress because then it can pitch either one of these to special summon itself, and then you have one of these in rotation. Now if you don't have one of these in your hand, you're going to want to go ahead and probably send Citadel if you have no other way of getting it into grave, because Citadel is the key monster in your game plan. So for this example, we're just going to say we don't have Fortress in hand, we don't have Runeforce in hand, we just had Gearframe, we normal summoned it, and we're doing the combo, air quotes. You're going to send the Citadel off of your Class Bars, then you're going to overlay these 2 into your Gear Gigant X, and then you're going to Gigant to effect to search, and you're going to search another Gearframe. So just off of Gearframe, you have Gear Gigant X on board with another search on your next turn, you have Citadel and Grave to summon whenever your Gear Gigant is destroyed, and you have Gearframe in your hand as a way to start playing again on your next turn. So this is in addition to the other 4 to 5 cards you have in hand if you went second or if you had extra. So yeah, you just have so much advantage just off of normal summoning Gearframe that I think this deck has a very strong chance at playing in the current format. Runeforce is one of the strongest negates in the game if it happens. The only problem is he's just a battle phase negate, which granted, still pretty strong. Alright guys, this has been Patrick from Top Tier Gaming. Make sure you join our Discord, follow our Twitter, subscribe, of course. I don't know why I didn't say that first. Like the video. That helps us a whole lot. We're trying to get to 6K. Have a good day. Bye.